Have you ever felt that odd sensation of being completely awake while everyone around you seems to be walking through life in a trance? That distinct feeling when you notice the subtle patterns in human behavior that others completely miss, as if you suddenly gain access to a hidden layer of reality that most people cannot perceive. This is not your imagination playing tricks on you. What you are experiencing is the initial stages of consciousness awakening, a profound shift in perception that fundamentally changes how you interact with everything and everyone around you. I have walked this path myself, feeling the initial confusion, the isolation, and eventually the profound peace that comes with awakening. The journey begins with that unsettling sensation that something is different about you, about how you see the world, as if you have been given glasses that allow you to see beyond the surface of things into their true nature. And once you start seeing in this way, there is no going back to the comforting numbness of sleep. Think back to those moments when you found yourself in a crowded room, hearing conversations that seemed scripted, watching interactions that felt rehearsed, and experiencing a strange sense of detachment from it all, as if you were watching a play where everyone but you knew the lines. Perhaps you felt a heaviness in your chest, a subtle ache that came from recognizing patterns in human behavior that seemed to keep people trapped in cycles of suffering they could not even recognize. You may have tried to point these patterns out to friends or family, only to be met with blank stares or dismissive comments. This is the first painful realization that comes with awakening consciousness, the understanding that not everyone is ready or willing to see what you now cannot unsee. This awakening is not random or accidental. It follows a natural progression that mirrors what we know about how human consciousness develops from the earliest stages of life. Just as a child must pass through distinct phases of cognitive growth to reach maturity, our spiritual consciousness develops through similar stages of expansion. When we are born, we experience the world directly through our senses, much like what psychologist Jean Piaget described as the sensory-motor stage of development. We are pure awareness, completely present in each moment, with no separation between ourselves and our experience. But as we grow, we learn to categorize, to name, to separate ourselves from our environment. We build mental frameworks that help us navigate the world, but at the cost of that pure, direct experience. The society we live in reinforces these mental constructs, encouraging us to identify with our thoughts rather than observe them, to react automatically rather than respond consciously, to accept external authority rather than trust our inner knowing. Most people remain at this level of consciousness throughout their lives, functioning through what we might call the pre-operational or concrete operational stages of spiritual development. They live within the boundaries of the mental constructs they have built, rarely questioning the nature of reality or their place within it. Their sense of self is defined by external factors and roles, relationships, possessions, and social standing. They may live entire lifetimes without experiencing the profound shift that you are now navigating. What sets you apart, what marks you as one who is awakening, is your capacity to move into what corresponds to Piaget's formal operational stage on a spiritual level. You have begun to think about thinking itself. You have started to observe your own patterns of thought and behavior from a place of awareness that transcends them. This metacognitive ability allows you to see that you are not your thoughts, not your emotions, not even a sense of self that you have constructed over a lifetime. You are the awareness in which all these things arise and pass away. This recognition is the cornerstone of awakened consciousness. But this awakening does not happen all at once. It is a process of continuous expansion and integration, much like the way we build knowledge in any domain. Each new insight creates a temporary disturbance in our existing mental frameworks. We must either reject the new information or adjust our understanding to accommodate it. This process of assimilation and accommodation, as Piaget described it, is precisely what is happening as your consciousness awakens. Each moment of clarity, each insight into the nature of reality, creates a small earthquake in your existing worldview. The old structures begin to crumble, and in their place, something new and more expansive begins to take form. Take a moment now to reflect on your own journey. What were the first cracks in the facade of conventional reality that you noticed? When did you first sense that there was something more to life than what you had been taught? How did those around you respond when you began to question the assumptions that most take for granted? I invite you to pause here and consider the specific moments in your life when you felt this awakening beginning to stir within you. What was the initial signal that your consciousness was expanding beyond conventional boundaries? Was it a profound spiritual experience, a moment of clarity during meditation, an encounter with someone who seemed to operate at a different level of awareness? Or was it a gradual process, a slow recognition that your perspective was shifting in subtle but significant ways? Pause for a moment and reflect how many times you felt this profound disconnect with the world around you, as if you were observing a theater where everyone knows their lines, except you. If you are feeling this now, know that you are not alone. Share in the comments by simply writing "I recognize myself in this awakening journey." Your comment might be exactly what another soul needs to read today, to feel that they are not alone in their perception. And if you wish, share a specific moment when you felt this awakening happening in your life. I am reading every word, every story. As your consciousness continues to awaken, you will likely experience periods of profound disorientation. The mental maps you have relied upon to navigate reality no longer seem to apply. The goals you once pursued with such determination may suddenly seem hollow and meaningless. Relationships that once felt essential to your identity may begin to feel constraining or superficial. This is not a sign that something is wrong. On the contrary, it is a natural consequence of seeing beyond conditioned patterns that have shaped your life until now. You are experiencing what Piaget would call a state of disequilibrium, a necessary phase in construction of new and more comprehensive understanding. During these periods of disequilibrium, many people make the mistake of trying to force themselves back into old patterns simply to escape the discomfort of the unknown. They recommit to unfulfilling relationships, redouble their efforts in careers that no longer resonate, or seek distraction in the endless stream of entertainment and consumption that our society provides. But for the awakening soul, these attempts at regression are ultimately futile. Once you have begun to see, you cannot choose to unsee. The only sustainable path forward is through continued expansion and integration. This path inevitably leads to a degree of separation from the mainstream consciousness of society. As you begin to operate from a different level of awareness, you may find that you can no longer engage in the same conversations, participate in the same activities, or maintain the same relationships that once seemed so natural. This is not about judgment or superiority. It is simply a recognition that you are now vibrating at a different frequency, and not everything from your previous life will be able to tune to this new vibration. Many spiritual teachings refer to this phase as the dark night of the soul, a period of isolation and purification that precedes a deeper spiritual rebirth. It can feel as though you are dying to your old self, and in a very real sense, you are. The identity you have constructed over a lifetime is being revealed as just that, a construction, not your essential nature. This recognition can be terrifying, as it seems to threaten your very existence. But what is really happening is that you are shedding the limitations of a false self to allow your true nature to emerge. Society has no framework for understanding or supporting this process. In fact, it may actively discourage it, labeling it as a crisis, a breakdown, or even a form of mental illness. This is because awakened consciousness poses a fundamental threat to the structures of power and control that depend on widespread unconsciousness. When people begin to wake up to their true nature, they can no longer be manipulated through fear, greed, or the promise of external validation. They begin to make choices based on inner wisdom rather than external pressure, and this makes them unpredictable and uncontrollable from the perspective of conventional society. This is why many who experience awakening choose to withdraw temporarily from active engagement with the world. This withdrawal is not an escape or a rejection of life, but necessary retreat for integration and realignment. Just as a caterpillar must enter the chrysalis to transform into a butterfly, the awakening human must create space for profound reorganization of consciousness that is taking place. This might mean spending more time in nature, in meditation, or in the company of others who understand and support your journey. It might mean simplifying your life, reducing external stimulation, and creating periods of silence and solitude. Some may see this withdrawal as selfish or indulgent, but it is actually a form of responsible self-care. You cannot serve from an empty vessel, and during this transition, your inner resources are being completely reorganized. The energy that was once directed outward in constant doing is now needed for the inner work of being and becoming. This is not permanent, but a phase in the larger journey. Eventually, those who awaken return to engagement with the world, but from a completely different level of consciousness. When you do re-engage, you will likely find that your priorities have shifted dramatically. The pursuits that once seemed so important, the accumulation of wealth, status, or power, may now seem like hollow distractions from what truly matters. You may feel called to serve in ways you never considered before, to contribute to the awakening of consciousness in others, or to address the root causes of suffering rather than just its symptoms. You will likely feel a deeper connection to all life, a recognition that the apparent separation between self and other, between humanity and nature, is an illusion created by limited perception. This expanded perception is not just a philosophical position or a temporary state of mind. It represents a fundamental shift in how your brain processes information and constructs meaning. Recent research in neuroscience suggests that what we call awakening or enlightenment correlates with measurable changes in brain function. The default mode network, which generates a narrative of a separate self, becomes less dominant, while connectivity between diverse regions of the brain increases. This allows for a more holistic, integrated perception of reality, one that transcends the boundaries created by conceptual thought. But even as your perception expands, you must still function in a world that operates largely from a more limited consciousness. This creates a unique set of challenges. How do you communicate experiences that transcend conventional language? How do you make decisions when the values and priorities of awakened consciousness differ so radically from those of mainstream society? How do you relate to loved ones who do not share or understand your perspective? These questions have no universal answers. Each awakening being must find their own way of bridging these different dimensions of experience. Some choose to create communities of practice where awakened consciousness is understood and supported. Others find ways to translate their insights into forms that can be understood and applied within conventional structures. Some become teachers or guides, while others express their awakened perception through art, writing, or innovative approaches to traditional fields like business, education, or healthcare. The path you choose will depend on your unique gifts, circumstances, and the specific form your awakening takes. What all these approaches share is a recognition that awakening is not an endpoint but a continuing journey. There is no final state of perfect enlightenment where all questions are answered and all challenges resolved. Instead, there is an ever-deepening process of discovery and integration, as more subtle layers of conditioning are recognized and released, and more expanded dimensions of consciousness become accessible. This journey never ends because consciousness itself is infinite in its potential for expansion and expression. Critics of the awakening path often accuse those on it of spiritual bypassing, using spiritual insights to avoid dealing with practical realities or personal issues. And indeed, this can happen when awakening is misunderstood as a transcendence of human experience rather than a fuller embodiment of it. True awakening does not mean escaping from the messiness of human life into some purely spiritual realm. It means bringing the light of awareness into every dimension of experience, including the physical, emotional, and relational aspects of being human. This includes facing and integrating the shadow aspects of your psyche, the parts of yourself that you have denied, repressed, or disowned. As consciousness expands, these shadow elements often become more visible, which can be disorienting and painful. But this too is part of the process. By bringing awareness to these previously unconscious aspects of yourself, you reclaim the energy that was locked in their suppression and create the possibility of more authentic and integrated expression. The path of awakening is not about achieving some idealized state of perpetual bliss or transcendent detachment. It is about being fully present with all that is both within and without. It is about recognizing your true nature as awareness itself, while also honoring your human embodiment. It is about seeing perfection inherent in all of existence, while also engaging skillfully with the apparent imperfections of the relative world. This paradoxical perspective allows you to be both fully engaged and completely free, actively participating in life while remaining unbound by its dramas. As more individuals undergo this transformation of consciousness, a larger shift becomes possible for humanity as a whole. Just as individual consciousness develops through stages of increasing complexity and integration, collective consciousness evolves through similar phases. For most of human history, we have operated from tribal, mythic, or rational levels of collective awareness, each with its own strengths and limitations. The widespread awakening of consciousness that is occurring now points toward the emergence of more individual awareness that can honor and include the wisdom of all previous stages while transcending their limitations. This evolution is not guaranteed. It depends on a critical mass of individuals doing the inner work of awakening and finding ways to express that awakened consciousness in their relationships, communities, and institutions. It depends on our willingness to face the shadow aspects of our collective psyche, the patterns of exploitation, domination, and self-destruction that have shaped much of human history. And it depends on our ability to imagine and create new forms of human organization that reflect and support a more awakened consciousness. If these reflections have served as a mirror for your own experiences, perhaps there is a greater purpose in our paths having crossed today. The subscription to this channel is simply a way of keeping this connection alive, allowing these seeds of consciousness to continue finding fertile soil. The decision is entirely yours and will be honored whatever it may be. For those who feel the call to continue in this shared exploration, I will be here, sharing each insight of this awakening journey. You stand at a pivotal moment in both personal and collective evolution. The awakening of your consciousness is not separate from the larger awakening that is possible for humanity. By doing your own inner work, you contribute to the transformation of the whole in ways that extend far beyond what you can see or measure. Every insight you integrate, every conditioned pattern you release, every moment of genuine presence ripples outward, affecting the field of consciousness that we all share. This understanding brings both responsibility and freedom. You are responsible for the quality of consciousness you bring to each moment, knowing that it affects not just your experience but the collective field. Yet you are also free from the burden of having to fix or change others directly. The most powerful contribution you can make to planetary awakening is the transformation of your own consciousness. As you embody more awareness, clarity, and compassion, you naturally become a catalyst for awakening in every environment you enter. The soul only receives what it desires when it learns to let go of what it no longer needs. This paradoxical truth lies at the heart of the awakening journey. By releasing your attachment to who you thought you were, you create space for your authentic nature to emerge. By surrendering the illusion of control, you access a deeper intelligence that can guide your life more effectively than your limited ego ever could. By dying to your old self, you are born into a vastly expanded identity that includes but transcends your individual experience. This expansion does not happen through effort or striving. It happens through allowing, through creating the conditions in which awakening can unfold naturally. Just as a gardener does not force a seed to grow but provides the soil, water, and sunlight it needs, you cannot force consciousness to awaken, but you can cultivate the conditions that support its natural evolution. These conditions include regular periods of silence and stillness, honest self-reflection, connection with others who share your values and vision, and a willingness to face and integrate whatever arises in your experience. As you continue on this path, remember that awakening is not a special state reserved for spiritual adepts or mystics. It is a natural flowering of human consciousness when the obstacles to its evolution are removed. It is your birthright, not an achievement. The work is not to attain something new, but to recognize what has been present all along beneath the layers of conditioning and forgetting. You are already that which you seek. The journey is one of remembering, of coming home to your true nature, which has never been absent, only obscured by the clouds of unconscious thinking. In the end, the awakening of consciousness reveals a simple but profound truth that we are not separate from each other or from the totality of existence. The sense of being a separate self, encapsulated in a body and disconnected from the whole, is revealed as a mental construction, a useful fiction for certain purposes, but not the ultimate reality of who you are. When this illusion of separation dissolves, even momentarily, what remains is a direct recognition of your fundamental interconnection with all of life, a recognition that transforms how you perceive and interact with everything. This recognition is not just a spiritual insight, but the foundation for a new way of living on this planet. The crises we face as a species, climate change, economic inequality, political polarization, all stem from the illusion of separation and the behaviors it generates. Only a consciousness that recognizes our fundamental interconnection can create systems and societies that reflect and support that truth. By awakening to your true nature, you become part of the solution to these collective challenges, not through outer activism alone, but through the radical transformation of consciousness itself. So I invite you to continue this journey with full commitment and gentle patience. Trust the process even when it feels challenging or unclear. Know that you are not alone, that countless others are walking a similar path, and that every step you take toward greater awareness contributes to the awakening of the whole. Remember that the ultimate purpose of this journey is not just personal liberation, but the transformation of our shared reality in service of all beings. Let this larger vision guide and inspire you, even as you focus on the immediate next step that is yours to take. The awakening of consciousness is the greatest gift you can give to yourself and to the world. It is a journey of unending discovery, challenge, and wonder. It will ask everything of you and give you back more than you could imagine. It will break your heart open and rebuild it with capacity for love and compassion beyond what you thought possible. It will shatter your limited identity and reveal your boundless nature. It is a journey for which you were born, the adventure that gives meaning to all other experiences. Welcome home to yourself. The time for awakening is now.